Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording this on 4/19/2024 at about just before 10 o'clock New York time. I want to kind of give some thoughts that I have of chaos theory and this new concept that kind of popped in my head today. About 4 years ago, I was talking about the differences between black swans, white swans, and dragon kings in relation to probability theory, all right, and chaos theory. Let me just reiterate those concepts and then give a new concept. So black swan is an event that can't be known, that is an event that has low probability but high impact. All right, so it's an event that is extremely rare, that can't be predicted. A Dragon King is a catastrophic event that, if you know where to look, would be able to determine it. So a Dragon King and a black swan in its result after the fact is the same. The big difference between the Dragon King and the black swan is that one can be discerned and the other one cannot be. The black swan cannot be, in theory, be discerned. A white swan is a high impact event that will that can be known, that you can see. All right. So some people would say, what's the differences between a white swan and a dragon king? With a dragon king, it's somewhat hidden, and that you don't really fully understand and how it's going to propagate and lead to the catastrophe. But you do know that a catastrophe is going to happen. A white swan can be viewed as it's more visible. It's like a slow moving train colliding into a brick wall or something like that. So you know what is going to happen, and you roughly can discern how when it will happen. All right. And then I want to bring up this concept of a red heifer. Now, the red heifer is an event that, I don't know, out of every, I think out of every 50,000 births or something like that, or yeah, 50,000 births, it's possible to have a red heifer. But for it to actually reach its purity over the 3 or 4 year before the sacrifice, it's pretty rare. So, what how does it fit into with chaos theory? How does the red heifer fit into chaos theory? Is it a black swan? Is it a white swan? Is it a dragon king? Or is it something else? And my thoughts at this moment in time is it's something different. It's something that is known that it has happened and will happen. But we happen to have four right now that are pure enough to be sacrificed. We had five, but as of right now, it seems as there are four. They haven't been sacrificed yet, but independent of them being born almost 3 years ago or 3 years ago, let's just assume that they weren't born. We knew that there were nine going all the way back to Moses. And so subsequent generations, there were a total of nine since the fall of the Second Temple. So we know these events happened, and they happened at least 9 times. It just so happens that we have four that are right now potentially able to be sacrificed for the red heifer ashes. So it's not a black swan because it's a known event that has happened in the past. You just don't know when it's going to happen. And it's not fully transparent to the observer when it actually takes place or if it takes place. So it's not a white swan. So is it a dragon king? Now, with a dragon king, it is some sort of failure in the system where there's a catastrophic event of absolute complete failure. Perfect example of a dragon king would be the seal ring for the shuttle. When the shuttle blew up, there was seal rings for its boosters that were too cold, and it led to a catastrophic event. Now, if you knew where to look, it could be predicted that there was going to be a system failure. It's only after the fact. But if you had eyeballs on there, you probably would see, that this could be a complete disaster. So this is kind of a dragon king, that there's some sort of problem with a complex system that will lead to catastrophic failure. Now, over time, the shuttle, as it was being launched, the engineers knew that they had ring seal problems with the boosters, and that design needed to be updated, especially during cold weather. Now, we also had another shuttle that exploded during reentry, and that was because of the tiles. And it was known through cameras being fitted on the shuttle system as it was launching, seeing the foam that breaking off and hitting the tiles, especially around the wing area, and causing damage to the thermal tiles. Now, this is a case where they saw what was going to happen, and they failed to fix it. So it's a little bit different than the O-ring. The O-ring, they only knew after the fact, after the disaster, because they really didn't have any pictures to see what was really going on with the O-ring. But when these boosters fell back to the earth, they could see that there were problems that were taking place, especially at colder temperature launches. So they could discern that a potential problem could happen, but it didn't happen yet. With the tiles breaking, they actually saw the tiles breaking. So it's both situations, even though they're slightly different, are kind of a dragon king. But is it possible? And it's just a question that I have in my mind. Is it possible that a red heifer, what is it? Is it something more like a dragon king? It's not a white swan because it's not fully transparent, because you don't know when they will be born and if they'll be able to be sacrificed. It's not a black swan because you do know that there have been things like this in the past, but you don't know when that will happen in the future. Now, one could say, well, isn't the stock market similar to what you're talking about? That perhaps stock markets can't be modeled as black swans, as Dr. Taleb would say. And this is the big debate between Dr. Taleb and Dr. Sornet, between Dragon Kings and black swans. You know, Sornet's basically saying, well, the stock market, if you know where to look, there is some sort of fracture point, and there will be some sort of loss in liquidity in the market, or a failure in the system. Now, it could be a social system, it could be a mechanical system, a biological system, it doesn't matter. The more philosophical question between Sornet and Taleb is that if the stock market, if financial markets crash, are they really black swans or are they Dragon Kings? There are researchers that fall into the category, well, all stock markets will or all financial markets are basically Dragon Kings. And then there's another subset of researchers out there that are saying that these high impact, low probability situations in social systems, especially in the financial markets, are black swans. So I take the stance that in most situations, that if you know where to look, you'll be able to discern where that market illiquidity will take place. And so in most cases, you're going to see Dragon Kings. But there are situations where you think a system is more stable. For example, creating derivatives that, if they're done correctly, would reduce risk, and then selling those derivatives to investors, that it makes the system more liquid and more stable. But in essence, it didn't. And therefore, an event that took place that couldn't be discerned until just before it happened. There were some people that were predicting Lehman crash about a year or two before, but it was an ongoing derivatives problem, an insurance problem, and subprime borrowing problem that was emerging in the United States and truthfully around the world. So there are certain situations, social systems, where you think it's actually more stable, but it ends up being completely more fragile. And therefore, this is where the black swan comes in. Now, the moments that you start to see the crack, then someone would say, okay, this is where the black swan is. Or I'm sorry, where the Dragon King is. And once you see the crack, you can run scenarios in your mind where this is going and predict system failure. Sometimes it's so fast that it flies underneath your surveillance mechanism on how the system is going to fail, and the black swan takes hold. So this is that big debate between black swan and Dragon King. So, where's the red heifer in this? The red heifer is something that is known to have happened, is known that it will happen, and it is known that it's potentially around the corner in our time. So it's not a black swan. It's not a white swan, because there's an opaqueness to it of if the sacrifices will take place, for many, many reasons. And this is part of the reason why I've been reading to the audience the Para Duma chapters from Maimonides. Lots of things can go wrong. So it's not a white swan, because it's not a completely known high impact event. It's going to be a high impact event, but it's not 100% known. There's some opaqueness to it. So it falls more into the category of Dragon King. That once it takes hold, once the sacrifices take place, and the ashes are prepared, and the purification process starts to begin for the Jewish people, then this is the countdown for the actual temple to be rebuilt. Now, there are some people that think that the temple will just appear. There are other people that say that it'll take time to actually build. So it depends on who, you gravitate to in terms of, the interpretation. But there's definitely a countdown that takes place because these ashes from the red heifer are so important. So it is a high impact event. So all three, Black Swan, White Swan, and Dragon Kings, are high impact events. The question is, what is known before the high impact event? So I don't see this red heifer as a black swan. It's not a white swan, but it's closer to a Dragon King. But is it potentially something slightly different than the Dragon King? And these are questions that I have in my mind, and perhaps people that are listening could actually put their comments in and maybe give their opinions on it. My original thoughts at this time are that it's probably closer to a Dragon King than its own thing, because it's a high impact event. Dragon Kings are high impact event, and that once you see the crack, once you see something emerge, that you can discern where the system is going. And so once the slaughter of the animals take place and the ashes are prepared, and as you know through the readings of the Para Duma, that it is an extremely complex series of things that have to take place. And everything has to be done right. But you can discern where this is going, and that is the building of the Temple Mount. And the high impact is obviously, a temple we haven't had a temple for over 2,000 years. But not just that, it's the high impact of the geopolitical stability of the region in the Middle East, and potentially the geopolitical stability around the world. And this interplay between the Jewish faith and the Islamic faith and the Christian faith. So it's definitely going to be a high impact event. And we sort of can see in how this is all playing out, where it will be the rebuilding of the Temple Mount and the taking down of the Dome of the Rock. So it does seem as though it's more like a Dragon King. It's that the red heifer is, a Dragon King. But, is it something different? Is it something slightly different? Sornet always used the example of the booster rockets or the hydrogen tank for the shuttle as a great example, where if you potentially see a crack or a weakness in a system, then you can run simulations, or you can run an analysis to determine the probability of certain things to happen downstream. Run Monte Carlo simulations, or think about strategic options a few time periods away, where price movement might go if certain things. So these things are called probability cones, or strategic options. Or a great example is a player on, let's say, a chessboard makes a move, then your moves will be dictated based on the previous player's move. But there's optionality up to a certain point, but there's optionality in how you would strategically move in that game. So there's these probabilities. Is it better Is it more probable to go in one direction or more probable to go in another direction? So my mind at this moment in time is more that that red heifer is a Dragon King, and then it doesn't have a unique feature other than the religious component to it. Now, what is interesting is that it has this purification, and what this is an idea that popped in my mind. All right, one thought is that when a black swan event happens, a white swan event happens, or a Dragon King event happens, you have this high impact event, and there, especially if it's a negative event, something that is, a hurricane that hits a town, or stock market crashes, or a death, or whatever. These high impact events, they're negative, in that there's a cleansing. Like in the financial markets, their greed leads to markets to become unstable, and then the market crashes, and then people become more conservative with their money. When someone dies, especially due to, let's say, poor lifestyle choices, people that are surviving sometimes gets a wake-up call to change their ways, because they may be doing the same thing. So there is a certain cleansing process where one thinks about previous behavior and tries to change it. So there is a purification that's taking place, similar to the purification of the soul through the red heifer ashes when someone is exposed to a corpse. So there is this, all three examples, black swan, white swan, and the Dragon King, they all have some level of purification process, uh, because it's a change of behavior, so a change of social behavior. Or let's say, for example, a species gets out of sync with its environment to the point where it actually is hurting itself, and something will happen to that species and get it back in homeostasis. So there is this getting back to homeostasis, or repenting, or changing one's behavior because of seeing a catastrophic event happen. And that may actually be a takeaway of this idea of the purification process. It's the starting of a new. It's purifying the soul to be able to move forward in a different way. So it's very possible that the world is getting more chaotic, more belligerent, losing moralities, to the point where the system is fracturing and needs purification. So there may be, the red heifer may not necessarily be, in terms of probability or chaos theory, any different than the Dragon King. But there is a takeaway that there it it is it at the core of the red heifer ash is the idea of purification. And maybe that's the big difference, is that it's subtle in the Dragon King, that after a system failure, that there's a change of behavior if there are people that survive for another day, to change that mechanical device or that social system. It was more focused on, the Dragon King is more focused on the idea that if you know the propagation of some sort of issue within some system, that you can extrapolate where this might be going. But it doesn't really focus so much on the idea of correction. It's just focusing on what would be the end process of the system failure. In the case of, let's say, the shuttle, the tiles get cracked or chipped, and during re-entry, the shuttle catches fire. It doesn't focus so much on the corrective measures to prevent that from happening. And I think perhaps the red heifer is this it is this idea of the Dragon King. So the red heifer is like a Dragon King, but it has this added component of purification, self-renewal, and moving forward in a better way in some sort of system, mechanical system or social system. So perhaps it's slightly different. It's an augmented type of Dragon King. Those are some of my philosophical thoughts on the ideas of black swan, white swan, Dragon Kings, and red heifers. So thank you for listening. Please subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please click the links in this description and make sure you follow me. You can also follow me on X and on GETTR or on Facebook. You can also follow me on Podomatic and Apple Podcast. In addition, if you would like to help support my work, you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also purchase my products that I have, health products. I have nano silver products. I have C60 products, which is a very strong antioxidant. And I have a plethora of different supplements that help to improve your health in many different ways, especially in improving your immune system and slowing down the inflammation and the aging process. I also have all natural deodorants and an even better bar, which is a skincare product that helps to relieve muscle pain, improve the skin, especially with psoriasis, help to smooth the skin. You can apply it on for bug bites and abrasions and cuts, and it'll help to heal it. If you apply the bar every day on just your skin every day, even if you don't have a problem, you'll notice that after about 3 or 4 days, your skin will start to be much smoother and healthier looking. So I have a lot of products on my store to help support your health and to help support my work. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for following, and have a nice day.